Repositioning cruises are a great way to get really cheap cruises that include some really nice cruise ports. There are loads of benefits to booking repositional cruises instead of booking a traditional cruise that starts and ends in the same place. We're going to have a look at all of those benefits in this video and work out why they are so cheap. Cruise ships tend to do a season in one part of the world and then move and do a season in another part of the world. A repositioning cruise is just the one-off itinerary between the two different destinations. I've actually been on 2 repositioning cruises, and my favourite thing about repositioning cruises is that they do really unique itineraries. A transatlantic cruise might stop in the Azores, it might stop at Bermuda. It does little places on the way that you wouldn't necessarily go out of your way to visit on a normal cruise. Most cruises in Europe don't go out into the Atlantic to visit the Azores and go back. So if you do want to visit places like the Azores, a transatlantic cruise is a great way to do it. Repositioning cruises happen all over the world, absolutely everywhere. Transatlantic and trans-Pacific cruises are the most popular ones. They tend to happen twice a year, but throughout the year, cruises will move from one place to another. A transatlantic cruise is, rather unsurprisingly, a cruise that crosses the Atlantic. The cruise ships normally come across from the USA to Europe during the spring, and then in the autumn/fall they will go back across to America. Generally speaking, cruise ships seem to try and follow warmer weather around. No one really wants to cruise in Northern Europe when it's raining and it's miserable during the winter. People here would much prefer to fly to the Caribbean and get a bit of winter sun. A good thing about doing a cruise like a transatlantic cruise is that they'll normally extend the itinerary at either end. So you might have a transatlantic cruise with a Caribbean, or you might have a transatlantic cruise with the Canary Islands. So it's not just being on the sea all of the time. There are, of course, some transatlantic cruises which literally go across the ocean in 6-7 days and that's it, you're on, you're off. But a lot of the time they will try and add in these little ports to give you something a bit special. Transatlantic cruises can take as little as 6 or 7 days. Trans-Pacific cruises can take much longer. The Pacific Ocean is absolutely massive. It actually covers over 30% of the entire world, which is just insane. There are so many opportunities to cross the Pacific Ocean in all kinds of directions at all times of year. If you are taking a Trans-Pacific cruise, you will cross the International Date Line, which sounds just mad. It is the closest you can really get to real time travel. If you're heading east, you will skip forward a day, so you can be cruising on a Thursday and go straight into Saturday, which is absolutely mad. If you've got something you don't want to do, booking it on that Friday sounds like a really good idea. If you're going west, you will actually go backwards a day and you will relive the same day again. Of course, it is a different day, but it sounds to me like a movie. There's a lot of movies where you have to keep reliving the same day, and I think this is kind of as close as you can get in real life. There are loads of other repositioning itineraries. The cruise ships that are located in Alaska, a lot of those will reposition to warmer places during the autumn. They'll either head to Hawaii, to the Caribbean. Generally speaking, cruise ships can make more money when it is warm. More people want to cruise to warm destinations. So the cruise lines really do just end up going where the people want them to go. Wherever the demand is highest, they will follow around the world. Ships that are cruising around Northern Europe or Norway will tend to move down to the Mediterranean when it gets cold. There are a few cruise lines that do cruise through Norway throughout the winter, but it's very, very, very limited. In winter in Norway, it is dark all of the time, and in summer it is light all of the time. It's a very, very strange place. I actually took a cruise in the middle of summer to find the midnight sun. If you cruise to Norway in winter, you'll probably just be looking at the midday darkness. It is the best time to see the northern lights, of course, because it is dark, but generally speaking, cruise ships will move to warmer places in the autumn and winter. The main thing that makes me want to take repositioning cruises is the insanely cheap prices. If you ever see a cruise where it's £40-50 a night, you can almost guarantee that is going to be a repositioning cruise. You might be wondering why these cruises are so cheap, and it's generally just because they are more inconvenient. It's so much easier to go from one place, do a loop, and get back there. You can leave your car, you can book flights from the same airport. It is much easier. When you do start in one port and you end in another, it can be a bit of a pain, but that is why it is so cheap. I recently took a cruise with Marella, which went from Newcastle and it came back to Southampton. That meant that I had to fly one way. I couldn't leave my car at the port because it was completely the wrong end of the country, and it just took a bit more planning than a traditional looped cruise. Because the cruise doesn't start and end in the same place, it can mean that there are additional expenses at either end. For me, I had to fly up to Newcastle and I stayed in a hotel overnight. I would always recommend not flying in on the day of your cruise if you can avoid it. I have on occasion managed to do that, but it is quite stressful, and for peace of mind, the price of a hotel, I would recommend you go at least the day before. It definitely is possible to find really cheap one-way cruises. I think my flight to Newcastle cost me about £50, which honestly is nothing. Most repositioning cruises are quieter than normal cruises. The ship will not normally be at full capacity because children don't really go too much on repositioning cruises. They're normally out of the school holidays, they're kind of awkward times to travel, and they can be quite long. So say you have a cruise ship which can hold 4,000 passengers, you might only have 3,000 or possibly less on a repositioning cruise, because a cabin that could hold in theory 4 people will probably only have 2 and maybe even 1. Repositional cruises are really popular with solo cruisers because they are so cheap. Even if you have to pay extra for the fact that you're in a cabin by yourself, it's still a reasonable price. I took a repositioning cruise from Singapore to Tokyo on board the Golden Princess, which was absolutely amazing, the best cruise I've ever been on in my life. You never had to wander around trying to find a seat. There were so many sun loungers. It was very, very calm and relaxing. Everyone had a lot of space, and I think a lot of that was to do with the fact we were doing a repositioning cruise. Personally, I prefer my cruise ships to be a little bit on the quiet side. I don't really like wandering around and finding people everywhere, and on some cruise ships you can really struggle to find a seat in any bar, especially on a sea day. Sometimes it can be really hard to find a seat in the buffet too, so repositioning cruises from that point of view, it's a massive positive that they are so quiet. Having said that, repositional cruises can be much louder, much more exciting. Because the itinerary isn't really always that desirable, the cruise line will sometimes put on something fun to get people to go on that cruise. There's no way I would have flown to Newcastle to take a cruise when I live so close to the Southampton cruise port, but because this was a 90s theme cruise, it was a one-off cruise, I did not mind at all, and I'm so glad that I went. I do have a video of the 90s theme cruise which I will link to in the description. Definitely check it out if you are considering a theme cruise. It was my first themed cruise and I had so much fun. It was really, really good. Repositioning cruises allow cruisers to cruise year-round. If it wasn't for repositioning cruises, some times of year would just be a bit quiet. There wouldn't be very much choice, especially if you are here in Northern Europe and you're looking for a cruise in November or something. There's not going to be as much choice as there would be in July. Repositioning cruises really just open it up because there's so many more places you can go and there's so many more things you can see. Having said that, river cruises do not cruise year-round. River cruises have a very short river cruise season due to water levels and weather and all kinds of things. I do have quite a lot of river cruise content on this channel too, which is very, very different from ocean cruising. If you would like to know more, I will link to them in the description. Repositioning cruises do not sell out as fast as regular cruises, and that means you can get a last-minute deal really, really cheap. If you can cruise in a week's time or 2 weeks' time, you can get such bargains. I often see these come into my inbox and I think, should I just hand in my resignation and go on this insanely cheap cruise? Probably I shouldn't, but it's very tempting sometimes. Sometimes these cruises can be £30 or £40 a night. It would be cheaper for me to be on these cruises permanently than paying my mortgage for my house at home. Of course, that's not really how it works in the real world, but they're very, very, very cheap. If you can book a week off work and then wait till the last minute, if you're not too fussy about where you're going or what cruise line you're going on, you can get such bargains. Generally speaking, I recommend booking a cruise between 60 and 90 days before the cruise. At this point, all of the other passengers have paid their cruise fare, so the cruise line knows how many more cabins they have to fill. Another benefit is that repositioning cruises can be much longer than normal cruises. They can be 7 nights, 14 nights, 1 month, 2 months. You can even do a world cruise, which I suppose is the ultimate repositioning cruise. Often a world cruise that will take 3 or 4 months will be broken up into chunks, so you could always do 1 month's chunk or 2 months chunk or 2 weeks or a week, whatever you wanted. If you're someone that loves a sea day, a repositioning cruise is absolutely fantastic. I tend to avoid cruises that have too many sea days just because they require quite a lot of time off work. But if I didn't have to go to work, I would be there. I would be there every single day, cruising across the Atlantic and cruising back, hanging out in New York for a bit and then going to the Caribbean. Many people love sea days. It is the ultimate way to relax and recharge. I think I would like more sea days if I knew in advance that I was doing the sea days, so I could plan things that I wanted to do and bring a lot of good books. It would be fantastic to cruise back from America, so when you get home you don't have that horrible jet lag and you're not exhausted from an 8 or 10 hour flight. That honestly sounds like the dream to me. I will get there one day, but for now it's just a bit tricky to get the time off work. During the day there are a lot of things that go on cruises. There'll be quizzes and trivia, game shows, theatre shows, live music, absolutely loads. If you do have a lot of sea days on a cruise, the cruise line will tend to put on extra things to keep everybody entertained. If you're someone who likes go-karts and ropes courses and water slides, there are cruise lines for that. And if you're somebody who likes to sit by the pool with a book, there are cruise lines for that. There really is a cruise line for everybody, I believe. All we have to do is match everybody to the right cruise line, which is much easier said than done, I think. It's always important to do your research and try and choose the right cruise line, but I think this is even more important on a transatlantic, trans-Pacific repositioning cruise because you're going to spend so much more time on the ship. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.